Welcome to Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Evangelical Alliance Ireland. I'm Nick Park, and recently I've been reading about the Crimean War. A war that actually is quite important to understand if we want to understand what's happening in Ukraine right now, because the events of the Crimean War provided something that is the underpinning for the mythology that Putin has used in order to justify the invasion of Ukraine. Now, the Crimean War was basically the Russians had invaded what was then the Ottoman Empire, and now the British and the French and later the Italians and the Poles fought against the Russians. It's probably most famous in the UK for the charge of the Light Brigade. A very famous poem was written about it by Albert Lord Tennyson that describes this tiny British force charging down into the Valley of Death. And they were basically attacking some Russian guns, riding down a small cavalry charge down a long valley facing a lot of Russian guns. And the charge of the Light Brigade is remembered because it was great bravery by those who were involved in it. It was also great bloodshed, almost a suicidal attack that was taking place, but also great stupidity from the British officers that allowed this thing to happen. And it sort of gave rise to the whole thing that would later become more popular in the Second World War about the bravery of the common soldier compared to the stupidity of some of the commanding officers from the aristocracy. Lions led by donkeys, as it was said. But one of the primary reasons for that the charge of the Light Brigade took place at all was because of bad communication. Because one British officer, one aristocrat, sent a message to another commanding officer saying they had to send a force out to get those guns. Capture those guns. Now, it wasn't at that point clear what guns they were talking about. There were some British guns that it would be a great propaganda victory if the Russians could capture these cannons. And so that was probably what the order was meant to be. Don't allow the British guns to fall into the hands of the Russians. But it wasn't clear from the message, and the garbled message led the commanding officer on the ground to think they had to capture the Russian guns that were all focused on that valley. And so this charge of the Light Brigade was this small, lightly armed cavalry charge to try to capture these guns. And of course the guns are firing down at them. Great slaughter caused, which really is all about communication. You know, the Bible says that we need to clearly share the vision of what God has given us and told us to do. That an uncertain sound will create problems in the time of battle. And so there's a need, as much today in the church as at any time in history, for Christians to speak clearly, not to be confused in their speech, that we need to be able to give a reason for the hope that is within us. We need to be able to know how to share the gospel well and concisely so people can understand it. We need to be able to articulate our own testimony, to share what God has done in our lives, not in a meandering way that you need 2 hours to share it with somebody, but that if you meet somebody in the marketplace or you meet somebody in the checkout line at Tesco's, you can in maybe a minute or 2 minutes just share very briefly what Jesus has done for you in a way that impacts other people's lives. The power of good communication. It can be the difference between life and death. For the charge of the Light Brigade, it meant death rather than life for some very brave soldiers. But today, let's make sure that we can share the good news of Jesus and our experience of Jesus and do it well. And for those of us that are in leadership, to share the vision that God is showing his people and to share it well and clearly so that we are speaking words of life rather than words of death. God bless you today. Join us again tomorrow for another Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Evangelical Alliance Ireland.